The sound of the airplane's engine roared as James Walker leaned back in his seat, clutching a small velvet box. Inside was a diamond necklace, simple yet elegant, chosen specifically for Emma, his wife of 8 years. James had spent the last 2 years working tirelessly in Dubai as an engineer on a high-stakes construction project. The long hours, sleepless nights, and months of being away from home were all worth it, or so he believed, to secure their future. Emma had been his rock, his reason for enduring the loneliness of being thousands of miles away. Every video call with her was a lifeline. She would smile, her brown eyes crinkling at the corners, and assure him everything was fine back home in Seattle. Only a little longer, James. You're doing this for us, she had said during their last call. Now, as the plane descended, James's mind raced with plans for their reunion. He envisioned Emma's surprise when he walked through the door unannounced. He pictured her in their cozy living room, candles flickering, and the faint scent of lavender, her favorite fragrance, wafting through the air. The reality was starkly different. The taxi pulled up to the curb of their 2-story suburban home, the porch light glowing faintly against the dusk. James rolled his suitcase over the gravel, his heart hammering in anticipation. As he reached for the doorknob, he noticed something odd. The door wasn't locked. "Emma," he called out, stepping inside. The house was eerily quiet. The faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the floorboards were the only sounds. James set his suitcase down and made his way to the living room. It was empty, the couch cushions slightly askew. His eyes drifted to the coffee table. A wineglass stood half full next to another that was empty. A sinking feeling settled in his stomach, but he shook it off. Maybe she had a friend over, he muttered, trying to convince himself. He climbed the stairs, his footsteps deliberately soft. The bedroom door was ajar, and light spilled out into the hallway. As he pushed it open, the world seemed to tilt on its axis. Emma sat on the bed, her back turned to him, her bare shoulder peeking out from beneath a sheet. Beside her, a man, dark-haired, younger, and unfamiliar, sat shirtless, laughing softly. The necklace box slipped from James's hand, hitting the floor with a dull thud. The sound made Emma whirl around, her face draining of color as she met James's stunned gaze. "James, what are you doing here?" she stammered, clutching the sheet to her chest. The man scrambled to grab his shirt, his expression a mix of shock and guilt. James felt as though all the air had been sucked out of the room. His mind buzzed with a cacophony of emotions: rage, disbelief, humiliation. Without a word, he turned and walked out, Emma's voice trailing behind him. "James, wait. Let me explain." He didn't stop. The days that followed were a blur. James holed himself up in a hotel, replaying the scene over and over in his mind. He ignored Emma's calls and messages, unable to face her lies. The woman he had loved, trusted, and sacrificed for had shattered their life together in a single moment. Eventually, the anger began to eclipse the pain. Emma had betrayed him, and the thought of her living carefree while he suffered was unbearable. James decided he wouldn't be the victim. If Emma wanted to play games, he would show her the cost of betrayal. James stared at the untouched coffee on the hotel table, the bitterness in his chest far more potent than the dark liquid in the cup. His laptop screen glowed faintly in the dimly lit room. Weeks had passed since the betrayal, and though Emma's repeated attempts to contact him had dwindled, the pain remained fresh. But James wasn't the same man who had walked out of their house in shock. He was now a man with a plan. The first step in his revenge was information. James started digging into Emma's life during his absence. Late-night searches on social media, phone records, and email archives revealed more than he had expected. The man he'd seen with Emma was Daniel Carter, a fitness trainer at the local gym. The affair hadn't been a fleeting mistake. It had been going on for months. James clenched his fists as he read through the affectionate emails and saw the photos Emma had sent. But amidst his fury, a spark of strategy ignited. Emma and Daniel had built their relationship on lies, and James would ensure those lies would come crashing down. One evening, James visited an old friend, Richard Brooks, a tech-savvy cybersecurity expert. Over beers and an explanation of the situation, Richard agreed to help James dig deeper. "You sure about this, man?" Richard asked, glancing over his glasses as he typed away on his custom-built computer. This could get messy. I'm not going to sit back and let her destroy me without consequences, James said, his voice cold and measured. Over the next few days, Richard provided James with access to Emma's hidden activities. Bank statements revealed suspicious transactions, expensive gifts, romantic dinners, even a weekend getaway. James carefully documented everything, building a case that would eventually serve as the foundation for his revenge. The next phase of his plan required patience and subtlety. James returned to the house, feigning reconciliation, to Emma's surprise and delight. I needed time to think, he said, his voice carefully measured. Maybe we can work through this. Emma seemed hesitant, but relief washed over her face. James, I know I hurt you, but I'm glad you're willing to give us a chance. James smiled, masking his contempt. I just need honesty from now on. No more secrets. It was a lie, of course. James had no intention of forgiving her. Behind Emma's back, James worked to expose the affair to her social circles. He started with her friends, planting seeds of doubt. During a dinner party Emma hosted, James casually mentioned Daniel's name in conversation. Emma told me you guys met Daniel at the gym. What's he like? James asked, feigning ignorance. Emma froze mid-sip of her wine, her eyes darting nervously around the table. Her friends exchanged confused glances, sensing the tension. The cracks in Emma's facade were beginning to show. The final blow required meticulous planning. James decided to target Emma and Daniel publicly. He arranged for a surprise anniversary party at their house, inviting all of Emma's friends, colleagues, and even her parents. On the night of the party, Emma was beaming as guests filled the house. She had no idea what was coming. James, calm and composed, raised a glass to give a toast. I just want to thank everyone for being here tonight to celebrate our anniversary, he began, his voice steady but laced with hidden anger. Emma and I have been through a lot, and I think it's time to share some truths about our relationship. Emma's smile faltered, and her face turned pale. James continued, pulling out a folder. I've prepared a little slideshow to commemorate our journey. As the slideshow began, the room fell silent. At first, it was filled with pictures of happier times, vacations, holidays, and their wedding day. But then, the tone shifted. Screenshots of Emma's incriminating emails with Daniel appeared, followed by photos from their weekend getaway and receipts for their lavish outings. Gasps filled the room as the truth unraveled before everyone's eyes. Emma stood frozen, her mouth agape, while whispers spread among the crowd. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the kind of love and loyalty I've received, James said, his voice heavy with sarcasm. Emma's parents were the first to leave, their expressions a mixture of disappointment and disgust. Guests followed, murmuring apologies to James as they exited. Later that night, Emma tried to confront James, tears streaming down her face. Why would you humiliate me like that? She cried. James stared at her, his expression cold. Why would you betray me like that? You destroyed what we had. I just returned the favor. The aftermath of the anniversary party left Emma's life in ruins. Her social circle, once filled with brunches, book clubs, and weekend getaways, had shrunk to nothing. Her parents refused to answer her calls, her friends avoided her, and whispers of her infidelity circulated like wildfire. James, however, wasn't finished. Weeks later, Emma attempted to salvage what was left of her reputation. She approached James at his temporary apartment, pleading for forgiveness. James, I know I made a mistake, she said, her voice trembling. But you didn't have to ruin me like that. Please, let's find a way to move forward. James stared at her, unmoved. Move forward? You made a choice, Emma. Choices have consequences. Her eyes welled with tears. I still love you. James let out a bitter laugh. You love me? You loved me while you were in his bed? You loved me while you spent the money I earned to fund your little escapades? His voice rose, filled with anger he had suppressed for weeks. Emma flinched but didn't respond. That night, James decided it was time for the final act of his plan, a move that would ensure Emma felt the weight of her betrayal for years to come. He contacted Daniel. James met Daniel at a dimly lit bar downtown. Daniel had been hesitant at first but agreed. thinking James wanted to settle things like real men. So, Daniel began, shifting uncomfortably in his seat. What do you want to talk about? James leaned back, his calm demeanor unnerving. I want you to understand the damage you've caused. Look, man, I didn't know things would end up like this, Daniel stammered. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. James smirked. You didn't mean to? You knew she was married. You knew what you were doing. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a chilling whisper. But don't worry, Daniel. You're about to get everything you deserve. He slid an envelope across the table. Inside were screenshots of Emma's messages to Daniel, ones where she ridiculed him, calling him a distraction and a temporary fling. Daniel's face darkened as he read the messages, his jaw tightening. She played you too, James said, his tone cold. She used you to fill whatever void she felt while I was away. And now? She's probably telling herself she loved us both. Pathetic, isn't it? Daniel clenched his fists, but James stood up before the situation could escalate. Good luck, Daniel. You'll need it. Emma's world began crumbling further when Daniel confronted her. Their argument spilled into the parking lot of the gym where Daniel worked, drawing attention from bystanders. You told me you loved me, Daniel yelled, his voice echoing in the cold evening air. I did. Emma shot back, tears streaming down her face. No, Daniel spat, holding up the messages James had given him. You used me. You lied to me just like you lied to him. Their relationship dissolved in a fiery explosion of blame and regret, leaving Emma more isolated than ever. Meanwhile, James finalized his ultimate move, divorce. He ensured that the legal proceedings would favor him, thanks to the evidence he'd gathered. Their shared assets, including the house, were swiftly divided, with James walking away with the majority. Emma was left with a small apartment and mounting legal fees. As the dust settled, James reflected on everything that had happened. He had stripped Emma of her social standing, shattered her relationship with Daniel, and reclaimed control of his life. But as he sat alone in his newly purchased condo overlooking the city, a question lingered in his mind. Was it worth it? The anger that had fueled his actions was gone, leaving behind a hollow ache. The cool autumn air drifted through the window of James's condo as he sat on the balcony, nursing a glass of whiskey. The city below shimmered with life, a stark contrast to the quiet solitude of his new reality. For weeks, James had reveled in the satisfaction of dismantling Emma's world. But now, in the stillness of his evenings, a gnawing emptiness crept in. Emma's life had unraveled completely. The small apartment she now called home was a far cry from the house she and James had once shared. Her days were filled with silent regret and the echoes of everything she had lost. The once proud, charismatic woman had been reduced to a shell of her former self, navigating life without the friends, family, or partner she had once relied on. The phone calls and texts to James had stopped. Perhaps she'd finally realized that no apology or explanation could mend the chasm between them. James, however, wasn't entirely free from the consequences of his own actions. At work, colleagues whispered about his personal life, speculating about the dramatic events that had played out so publicly. His reputation as a dedicated professional remained intact, but the pitying looks he received were a constant reminder of his humiliation. His relationships with friends and family had also shifted. Some admired his resolve, while others questioned the lengths he had gone to for revenge. During one dinner with his sister, Sarah, she voiced her concerns. James, I get that she hurt you, but don't you think you've punished her enough? James shrugged, avoiding her gaze. She got what she deserved. Sarah leaned forward, her expression softening. Maybe she did, but have you stopped to think about what this has done to you? You're not the same person anymore. Her words lingered with James long after the conversation ended. One evening, James received an unexpected email. It was from Emma. The subject line read, "Closure." Hesitating for a moment, he opened it. James, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, and I don't expect forgiveness. I've spent weeks reflecting on everything I've done, and I realize now how deeply I hurt you. I don't blame you for what you did. I deserved it. But I need you to know that my actions weren't because of anything you did or didn't do. They were because of my own insecurities and selfishness. You gave me everything, and I threw it away. I will carry that guilt for the rest of my life. I'm writing this because I want you to find peace, even if it's not with me. You deserve happiness, James. You deserve someone who will love you the way I should have. Take care of yourself. Emma. James reread the email several times. It didn't absolve her of her betrayal, but it was the first time she'd acknowledged the pain she had caused without trying to justify it. He didn't reply. As weeks turned into months, James began to piece his life back together. He focused on his career, throwing himself into new projects that reignited his passion for his work. Slowly, he reconnected with old friends, rebuilding a support system that didn't revolve around his past. One afternoon, while jogging along the waterfront, James ran into Sarah. "You look good," she said, smiling. "Thanks," he replied, taking a sip from his water bottle. "Feels good to finally let go of all the anger." Sarah nodded. "I'm proud of you. Moving on isn't easy, but it's worth it." The first rays of spring sunlight filtered through the windows of James's condo, casting a warm glow over the minimalist space. Months had passed since the chaos of his revenge and the implosion of his marriage, and for the first time in a long while, James felt a sense of clarity. He stood in his kitchen, preparing coffee, the aroma filling the air. It had become part of his morning ritual, a small act of self-care that grounded him. As he sipped from his mug, he gazed out at the bustling city below, his mind surprisingly quiet. James had come a long way. Therapy sessions, prompted by Sarah's gentle urging, had helped him process the whirlwind of emotions he had buried beneath his anger. His therapist, Dr. Green, had been instrumental in guiding him to confront not only his pain, but also the choices he had made in response to it. "It's okay to feel hurt, James," Dr. Green had said during one session, "but the way we channel that pain determines whether we heal or remain stuck." The words had struck a chord. For all the satisfaction James thought revenge would bring, it had left him emotionally drained, tethered to the very betrayal he wanted to escape. Letting go was harder than holding on, but it was the only way forward. One day, while browsing a local bookstore, James met someone unexpected. Her name was Laura, a freelance travel writer with a quick wit and a warm smile. Their conversation had started over a shared interest in a book about architecture and soon evolved into a coffee date at a nearby cafe. Laura was refreshingly honest and grounded, qualities James found himself drawn to. Over time, their connection deepened. Unlike his relationship with Emma, there were no grand illusions or unspoken expectations, just two people learning about each other one day at a time. Meanwhile, Emma's life continued on its difficult path. She had left her job at the gym to avoid the judgmental stares and whispers and had started anew as a receptionist at a small clinic. It was humbling work, but it gave her the opportunity to reflect on her choices and rebuild herself. Emma had also started attending a support group for people navigating the aftermath of failed relationships. Sharing her story with others helped her find a sense of community and a sliver of hope for the future. One evening, while walking home from a meeting, she passed by the restaurant where she and James had celebrated their first anniversary. A wave of nostalgia washed over her, but instead of sadness, she felt a quiet acceptance. She had lost James, but in losing him, she had found a chance to confront her flaws and grow. James, too, found closure in unexpected ways. One morning, he stumbled across the necklace he had intended to give Emma, tucked away in a drawer. For a moment, he considered throwing it away but decided against it. Instead, he donated it to a charity auction, knowing it could bring joy to someone else. When Sarah asked him about it later, James simply said, "It's not about forgetting the past. It's about choosing how much power it has over you." On a crisp summer evening, James stood on the rooftop of a building with Laura by his side. The city skyline stretched before them, the setting sun painting the horizon in hues of orange and gold. "Do you ever think about what happened before?" Laura asked gently, sensing his introspection. James smiled faintly. "I do, but not with anger anymore. It's part of my story, but it doesn't define me." Laura slipped her hand into his. "You've come a long way, James." He nodded, feeling the truth of her words. For the first time, he truly believed it. The story of James and Emma ended in heartbreak, but it was also a story of resilience, reflection, and growth. In the end, James found the strength to rebuild himself and embrace a new chapter, one defined not by revenge or regret, but by hope and possibility.